Welcome back to the number one show for overreactions and predictions. It's the Kentucky Kernel Sports Podcast. More next. Welcome back to the Kentucky Kernel Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Alden Flowers, and I'm joined by three returners to the show this week. Introduce yourselves.
I'm Ali Chetanot, the assistant sports editor.
I'm Colton Johnson. I'm a sports reporter.
I'm Cole Park, the sports editor.
And this is the inaugural basketball episode of the season, and it is officially basketball time in the Bluegrass, as they like to say. And I had a really good time at Big Blue Madness this year. What were your guys' big takeaways from it?
I was a little underwhelmed. I was expecting Lil Wayne or someone to come out there, and it just didn't happen. I heard he was actually a confirmed guest, and it kind of fell through, so I was disappointed in that. I heard they played him all night, though.
Yeah, to be honest, I mean, I have some actual analytical takeaways from some of the games, but there's not a ton you can take away from it. But as for the event itself, it was really not all that. I think it's kind of like one of those family traditions that nobody really wants to do anymore, but you don't want to make grandma sad. You know what I mean?
They definitely need to spice it up somehow.
They got to do something. I mean, maybe combine the blue-white game and Madness or something like that, but this was just not it.
Well, I kind of like what they're doing, the blue-white game. You know, they went to, Pikeville last year, and they're going to Northern Kentucky this year. I think that's cool, and I kind of want that to be a tradition that stays
My gas tank
around.
doesn't like it very much.
Really?
Yeah. What do you think, Colton?
I mean, Joey Hart is going to be the greatest basketball player to ever play
Yep.
in blue and white, so that's all I have to say.
Okay.
Joey Hart is my MVP of the season already.
No, come on.
Go ahead and put it in.
He won one dunk contest. It was
Chisel it in stone, you know?
What? So, other than Joey Hart, because he's the obvious answer,
Okay.
who was the most impressive player that you guys saw do something, whether it be on the men's or women's side, when it comes to Big Blue Madness?
I gotta say, honestly, my biggest surprise player was on the women's team, and that was Amia Jenkins. Not participating in the 3-point contest. Wasn't expecting a ton out of her. You know, I wasn't wasn't very knowledgeable on her game going into it, and very, very lopsided exhibition for the men and women. For the women, 20-6 in the final. She was on the team with 20. She had 9 points, leading all scorers, with 3 3-pointers. She had herself more points than the entire other team did, and all 3 came from deep. So after seeing her not in the 3-point contest and seeing her kind of just, maybe it was just that she was hot that day, but she was just dropping buckets left and right, and that surprised me. I think she could really be, if she can do that consistently, she could be a really important piece of this team.
I'm going to shout out the ladies, too. I think Emma King in the 3-point contest was fun to see. I heard basically at Media Days, Kyra Elsie had nothing but praise for Emma this year. She's actually named her the team's off-season most improved player, which I find pretty interesting as she's the team's oldest player, too. So it's nice to see Emma get a little confidence and hopefully see her have a bigger role this season than she's had since she's been here, really.
I'm going to switch to the men's side. Mr. Reed Shepard, the Kentucky native. I was big on him in the 3-point contest. He didn't win. Antonio Reeves took care of that, but kind of hoping that he's going to be able to take some of that distance load off of Reeves, where he's not the only guy that, when last year, if it was anybody other than Reeves, it was kind of oh, well, they're really shooting a 3, and it's going to
On that note, though, shout out to Antonio Reeves. He looked really, I think he's only the second ever UK player to win back-to-back 3-point contests, and he looked money in the first round. I mean, the second round he missed a couple, but the first round is he just didn't miss, and he looked confident. He looked like he was ready to come back. And a guy, this is a very, very young Kentucky team that doesn't have a lot of returning players. So having one with the experience he has, I mean, not only is it going to be super key that he's like that, but kind of like you said, that if he does have an off game, there are other guys who can hit it from deep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this team's going to score a lot of points this year, and I think Reeves will probably average the most points every night, I'm assuming.
I could see him scoring around 20 on
Yeah,
almost every game.
I was thinking driving on the way here, he'll average 22 is what I was thinking, but
Kind of like his late season form last year, going into that Arkansas game at the end of the regular season. Yeah.
Yep.
This team has so many, and I think Big Blue Madness continued to prove it with Joey Hart kind of coming out and looking really good, including what we heard about him through Pro Day when Adu went down with, I think, a rolled ankle. He's fine, though. This team has so many guards that can play, and I'm really interested to see what the minute distribution looks like when it comes to DJ, Reed, Antonio, It's all these different guards that can play, as well as us having several bigs, including Big Z, who we haven't seen play yet, but I have big hopes, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. This team is really, I mean, we kind of knew they had a lot of depth, but it has even more depth than I thought they did.
You know, someone I want to kind of shout a little bit that's probably going to be pretty underrated. I don't even know that he'll play all as much as maybe some of these other guys will, but a guy that I didn't know a ton about, a freshman, didn't know a ton about, 3-star coming out and really had a pretty big role at Madness, was Jordan Burks. Mm-hmm. And he looked solid. I mean, I was, like I said, you know, in a class that has so many 5-stars, and then you had a 4-star and so many big names, it was easy to kind of lose the 3-stars in the shuffle, Joey and Jordan there. But not only did both of them play really well, but they both looked like they'd been on this team for a year or two already. And that's really, really impressive for a freshman coming into the program. And I would say that if it came down to the end of the season and Jordan Burks was the most underrated player on this team, it would not surprise me in the slightest.
Yeah, and I know it probably won't happen, but coming from I'm from West Virginia, where we've got 2 smaller teams, and they really get to utilize a red shirt that we kind of don't use here at Kentucky. I'd almost be interested to see if Cal would throw in a red shirt on one of these freshmen to try and see if he can preserve them for as long as he can here at UK.
It'd be interesting to see. I mean, one of the only things that's really stopped Kentucky from doing that so much is that Kentucky's got such an emphasis on, you know, the one-and-done system of sending people to the league. But, you know, you don't usually see one-and-dones as much with the 3-stars. So a guy like Joey or a guy like Jordan that, you know, you expect to be around for a few years, it wouldn't stun me to see. But also, like, do you want to sit that guy down for this year? Because he could come in. You know, Kentucky is a team also that you look in years past, and it's really, really struggled with injuries. And already you see that with Aaron Bradshaw, Ugo, and Adu, and, you know, all these guys that just I mean, last year it was a bench player, you know, not really like a main contributor, but Grant Derbyshire didn't play a single game because he had a bad leg injury. You had Reeves kind of beaten up at times. You know, 2 years ago you had Xavier Wheeler running to the moving screen. You had Ty Washington getting injured. I mean, you've got injuries every single year to some really key guys. So are you willing to lose a year of these guys if you need them to come in and play? Because the thing that surprised me the most about Madness, and albeit it's just Madness, but Joey and Jordan both, they looked like guys that, as a 3-star freshman, looked like they could already contribute to this team coming out of the gate.
Well, with the new rules over the last couple of years in the NCAA, a redshirt can now play 10 games in a season, so you can kind of really figure out whether you want to rip that redshirt off of him or not. So I'd be interested to see if Cal would throw one on at the beginning of the season, then maybe let him play some of these early games against New Mexico State and Texas A&M or Stonehill, and just see what they can do. And if they can be big contributors, rip the red shirt off. I mean,
big clarification there. You mean Texas A&M Commerce?
Yes, Commerce.
Well, I think Jordan is actually going to play a bigger role on this team. I think the reason why fans kind of view him as a player that might not do a lot for the team is because they don't really know him, and you know I think he arrived to the team like only a few days before the Global Jam, so it's not like a lot of fans really knew he was going to be at Kentucky to begin with. So I just think, you know, with a guy with him, like his size and length, I think he's going to be a guy that's going to do some work for Cal this season.
For me personally, watching Big Blue Madness, I know you've brought up Burks and stuff. Me personally, I'm big up on Mr. Dillingham. Love the way he plays. I thought he looked really confident. I mean, you know, it's just a scrimmage with, you know, guys that are his friends. But the way he was out, like moved out there with the ball, the way he handled the ball, the shots that he took, the confidence looked great. And I think he could be somebody that could really go hand in hand with Reeves and, you know, big scoring potential.
I think he's going to probably be the best bench player in the SEC. I think he can have potential to average around 7 to 10 points a game if, you know, he actually does get to end up on the court. I mean, there's a lot of talent on this court, but I agree with Dillingham too. I think he's definitely – he won't start, but he'll definitely be a role player off the bench that will probably be up there as one of the bench players in the country.
I mean, I think we're doing all this talk, and we've talked a little bit about how much talent they have on the court, and just to emphasize that, I mean, we haven't even mentioned the name Trey Mitchell yet, and I was able to do a really great feature on Trey. I'm really glad I got to sit down and talk with him and tell his story that's coming out shortly, but Trey Mitchell's a guy coming here with a lot of experience. Played at Texas, played 2 years at UMass, played at West Virginia most recently. And, I mean, he's a veteran leader on this team, and he's a guy that we're already looking like, where is he going to fit into this team? But it's not even like is he good enough? He's good enough. He's very, very talented. He's a very good player. He contributed in Global Jam. He contributed at Madness. And, you know, the fact that we're even looking at that we haven't even mentioned his name yet is crazy because, like, you look at certain other teams, maybe even in past years, maybe even 2 years ago, him coming to the program, he would have been top 4 player, like, looking at starting. And now it's kind of like, where's he going to fit in? You know what I mean?
I think when everyone's healthy, that front court is probably the best front court in the SEC. So, and I think Cal's going to have a lot of fun, you know, who's going to play where. He might have some fun, maybe even throw Big Z at power forward some games. I mean, you never know. I think this front court has the best depth in the SEC in the sense that not as many guys as other teams, but they have guys who would start on probably 8 or 10 SEC teams right now who won't play most games or
Absolutely.
most minutes, most games is
I
what
also
I mean.
want to shout out, too, like, kind of like what you just touched on there. We haven't seen Big Z play. We don't know what he looks like. I mean, I know Croatian and Serbian are very different things, but, like, you look at some of these big guys that are coming over from Europe in the league, like in the NBA. I mean, Nikola Jokic is a center, but he can shoot threes. He can hold the ball. He can create. So, like, we don't know what Big Z is going to look like. Maybe Big Z isn't just a true center. Like, maybe he can do all these things. He can create. He can shoot. He can carry the ball. So, like, maybe you can have multiple bigs in the court.
I think with Big Z, I think he's going to be more than some place that like 274 Sports has them as a guy who's just going to ride the bench all season. I think he's going to be a unicorn type player this season. I don't know if that's just me or not, but I'm really excited to see Big Z. I think he has the potential to really be a special type player for Kentucky, and who knows, maybe they can possibly keep him around for next season too, and that might be there's going to be a lot of hype around him if that does happen.
Well, he's an older guy too, isn't he? Like, isn't he older than most of the other team?
I don't know exactly how old he is. I can find out though.
I feel like I heard that somewhere, but I mean, when you really think about it though, apart from Madness, which is just kind of an exhibition and maybe a little bit of pro day, we haven't seen a lot of these guys play. We don't really know how they're going to work, and you know, you have those games early on that are like Texas A&M Commerce or your Stonehills, and maybe they're not the most exciting matchups. But they are going to be really interesting to see, like, you know, Cal's probably going to try out some lineups, see how guys are working, you know. But I just think the big thing is, you know, obviously every basketball team, and this one's no different, you have your guys, like, respectfully, like your Walker Horns and your Grant Derbyshires and Brendan Canada's who aren't going to be, like, consistently on the court. But
Or on the court at all, for that matter.
fair, but
Hey, Brennan Canada's going to play this year. Don't disrespect
he's on
him.
scholarship. But, I mean, like, there's so many players in this team that, I mean, they have enough for 2 full starting lineups that could really be key players in this team. And that's something that, especially if you're able to manage those egos and manage, you know, the team chemistry, you know, depth goes a long way in college basketball. And you have some older guys as well as a lot of the younger guys. So, you know, this team is one that we kind of touched on a little bit in our editor's picks, which will also be coming out shortly. We just did our Big Blue Madness special section previewing the basketball season that we just released on kykernel.com and on racks around campus. But I mean, this is a team that we say it every year with Kentucky, but we're being very serious when the ambition should be nothing short of a national championship.
100%.
Yeah, and I think that back to my depth thing, when we were watching the scrimmage at Big Blue Madness, I was sitting with one of my friends, and I looked at him and I said, either of these starting lineups would be acceptable at almost any program in the entire country, just with the scrimmage there, and that isn't including Aaron Bradshaw or Hugo or Big Z. So I'm really excited for what this season can bring, especially on the defensive side of the ball, which is something we've struggled in the past with, but I think we got the size this year to really show that UK can play some defense.
I'll tell you what I think is so special with this Kentucky team as well this year is you have all that depth you're talking about. You have all these players, and it's not like you know, they play nobody and they get into the SEC. They've got some tough non-conference opponents. These guys are going to get tested, and that's something that I think is really special. You see, you know, all the time teams that look really, really good but haven't had a ton of like really crazy opponents. They get to the tournament come postseason time and they can't compete against those teams. They don't know how to get punched in the mouth and respond. This is a Kentucky team that they're not going undefeated this year. Straight up, they're going to lose a game to a Kansas or a Gonzaga or maybe a Miami, Florida.
I think they have potential to lose maybe 6 games, 7 games, but that's
Easily.
not the end of the world, though. That's
Easily.
just the schedule being
Well, but
hard.
look at 2019, right before the COVID-19 pandemic hit. That team could have gone on a run and won a title. All that matters is how experienced you are in those matches and how well you're able to respond. And this Kentucky team is going to have to learn to respond early, and it's going to have those tests that's going to really make it, you know, shape it into what I think could be a serious contender. Because, I mean, you see it all the time. Teams that have been really, really good, that have been super solid, they go down in the tournament and they don't know how to come back. They don't know how to find that second level within them and make that comeback, and they lose. You see it every single year. That's why very rarely, it's not super common that the final, or I don't know the last time it's ever happened that the Final Four was all 1 seeds.
Mm-hmm.
One of them goes down. One of them gets punched in the mouth and can't respond. This Kentucky team is going to take some losses, might even some upset losses. I know, Alden, you over there, you're pretty big on Marshall. I mean, I don't want to say that too much, but even you can laugh at me for saying this, but they play at UPenn. Ivy League colleges are sneaky sometimes.
The Big Five Philadelphia teams don't sleep.
Ivy League colleges are
What
sneaky.
y'all know about
they're
the
sneaky
Big Five?
sometimes. They're sneaky sometimes. Kind of like you touched on a little bit earlier. We were talking before this podcast started. They have a play style that's not too dissimilar from Bellarmine, who's able to beat teams way better than them because of the way they play. And maybe this Kentucky's going to probably get upset a few times. They're going to lose some games. They're going to get upset, and Kentucky fans are probably going to get a little bit frustrated. But all these things are going to build them to be a squad that come tournament time, they've seen it all, they can handle it all, and there's no reason this team could not go all the way.
And it's going to sound weird for me to say this, but I'd almost rather this Kentucky team lose 4 or 5 games and be more weathered going into the tournament than an undefeated team. And I know that sounds wrong to say, but I don't want us to go into the tournament and not know what it feels like to have to come back in a game or have to play from behind. And I think Kentucky could really benefit from maybe a loss to a Kansas or a loss to maybe a Tennessee or a UNC. Yeah.
A lot of people forget this fact, but 2012, last time Kentucky won a national title, they didn't win the SEC tournament. Lost to Vanderbilt. And I remember I was younger at the time. I was with my dad. My dad's a lifelong UK fan, and he told me when that game happened, he said, better to get out of the way now.
Yep.
Better take a loss now, learn how to take it, learn how to rebound, get ready for the tournament time,
And the other loss that year, they lost to IU in November and then beat them in the tourney too.
Exactly.
So
they took that loss, they rebuilt, and they came back and beat them the second time. And I think there's too much emphasis on we need to win every single game and not too much emphasis on it's the regular season. It's a long season. It's a big tournament. We can learn from some of these games.
And Cal's done that on purpose, I think. He's done it for the past few years, I think, having these really tough out-of-conference games. And, we'll find out what type of team this is before the SEC even starts. So I think that's a benefit for both the team, fans, and coaches. So
absolutely. And, you look at the SEC as well. This isn't the SEC of 10 years ago. The SEC now is getting – it's becoming a very solid basketball conference. You've got teams that are ranked highly this year and teams that have ambitions this year. Alabama was the number 1 overall seed last year.
I don't expect Alabama to be that good as they were last year.
Well,
no. But they're going to be a Nate Oates team. It's going to be a hard team to beat. They're probably going to be top 3 SEC team this year.
Arkansas is going to be solid.
Arkansas is going to be good. What was the name of that guy that was hurt all last season? He's coming back this year. Let me remember his name too. But
don't sleep on Vanderbilt this year.
I haven't slept on Vanderbilt since last season.
Stackhouse is cooking something over there.
No, I think Vanderbilt's going to be a good team. Tennessee's obviously going to be a good team.
Absolutely, they always are.
So, again, I think, and we're not saying
Texas A&M.
Texas A&M is good, and
that coach is unreal.
That's not because Kentucky has. I don't like the idea that Kentucky has really. They have fallen off a bit, but it's not like they've fallen off a huge gap that a lot of fans will say they do. I just think that Kentucky basketball has always been number 1 and will always be number 1. It's just the fact that other SEC teams are starting to care about basketball. That's the only difference in the SEC of now and SEC 10 years ago.
I didn't realize that L. Ellis was at Arkansas until just now looking at their roster trying to figure out who you were talking about.
Arkansas is insane in the transfer portal.
I didn't realize that they went and got Louisville guys down there in Arkansas.
Arkansas goes crazy in the portal.
It's not. Let me look real quick because it's going to kill me if I don't remember.
I know who you're talking about,
name.
But it's not.
You know
who
I'm talking about. He was a big guy, too.
Yeah,
he was a big guy, big front court. So I think, again,
Yeah,
let me refine that
I think some
name
people
real
take
quick.
for granted how bad some of these SEC teams used to be. Teams that, especially ones that were good at football, they did not care about basketball.
No.
But now,
Alabama.
I want to agree with what you said, big time. Kentucky maybe has taken a step back a little bit from where it was, but it's not the egregious step some people think it is. It's just the fact that the SEC is starting to catch up. They're starting to figure it out. They're starting to realize we've got all this money. We can have a solid basketball team. With NIL, with a transfer portal, with everything going on, there's no reason these schools can't have good basketball teams as well. And maybe some programs have stepped back. Florida used to be a lot better than it is now, but other programs like your Alabamas and your Texas A&Ms and your Vanderbilts, they're coming a long way, and they're looking like they can really threaten a Kentucky team.
Well, I kind of also don't like this idea that the SEC was horrible back in the
Wasn't
day either.
no.
I mean, Billy Donovan won back-to-back national championships there.
Last person to ever do it.
Yeah, so let's not act like they were playing a bunch of nobodies either here.
Former Marshall head coach Billy Donovan.
Okay. All right, let's chill
Had to
out.
get the Marshall plug in yet again.
Let's chill out. No, I mean, I definitely don't want to say that. I mean, it's had solid years, but I just think the SEC was never what we look at like. We look at like the Big 12 right now, and like teams can have losing conference records and still be considered one of the better teams in college basketball because they played ranked games twice a week for 3 weeks straight. Like there's times in the Big 12 where you've got like over half the conference is in the top 20.
Big Ten.
The Big Ten's another one. Like you have really tough opponents. I mean, the SEC's starting to become that, though. I mean, you're starting to see more and more teams, and because of the amount of teams, it's probably not going to be like Ole Miss and your Ole Miss and your Mississippi States and whatnot. But especially with Oklahoma and Texas coming, those are both teams that are pretty commonly in the top 25. I mean, Oklahoma just had a coach retire a few years ago, but Texas especially, it's a big program, and there's a lot of teams that are going to be really consistently good ranked opponents in Kentucky's conference schedule. So with that, along with a good non-conference schedule, with some teams that you can still beat thrown in the middle there, get your confidence back, get some rebuild going. I mean, Kentucky's schedule is one that, it's really
not what it used to be.
No, and it seems like it's really preparing them to be that contender.
I mean, I agree with everything you just said. I think some of those Kentucky-Texas games that are going to come in a few years are going to be classics too. And
At Texas is going to go crazy.
At Texas is going to go crazy, but I do believe that the SEC as a whole is getting better, and Kentucky just hasn't adapted yet. And who knows? Maybe this team that they have right now might be the answer to that.
I think the SEC getting better, maybe even Kentucky struggling a little bit, is better for Kentucky in the long run, though. I mean, like we just talked about earlier, you need to be able to be punched in the mouth. You need to have to. That's the criticism that Gonzaga gets every year, is that they schedule really tough in the non-con, but then they get in their conference play and they don't really play anybody. I mean, St. Mary's will probably be solid this year. They made the tournament last year. BYU just left there, but you can do all you want to in the non-conference schedule. You can schedule as tough as you can, and they do. They've got one of the toughest non-conference schedules in college basketball this year, but then you play in your conference play, and you play Pacific and Pepperdine and Santa Clara and San Francisco, and it's like, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, I know the Pac-12 will be looking for options over the next couple of years, so maybe
the
Gonzaga.
Pac-2?
Well,
The Pac-2?
Pac-2.
Mountain West, baby.
I can see Big 12.
The Mountain West is legit when it comes to basketball, so
They are.
Yeah, didn't they have 4 teams in it a few years ago?
I think so. I think they had 4 or 5, yeah.
They all didn't make it out of the first round, though.
Colorado State did.
No, I'm not talking about 2 years ago, Colorado State lost to Michigan. They got upset in the first round by Michigan.
Oh,
that
you're
was
right,
the
you're right,
that was
you're
the
right,
Michigan
you're
team that underperformed all
Yeah.
year and then upset them.
Yeah.
Did Nevada go on a run?
Then they beat Tennessee after that, didn't they?
Oh, wow. Back when the Martin twins were there.
Yeah.
But no, 2 years ago I was in there. That was when Kentucky lost to St. Peter's. That was the same. That bracket there was the same one as the Michigan one. So I saw Michigan beat
was.
Colorado State, and then they beat Tennessee after that as well. That was a big stunner there. I remember that. That was kind of crazy to witness.
Yeah, I'm starting to think I remember that. Yeah. Hunter Dickinson was on that team, right?
Yeah, I think so.
He was.
Yeah.
We'll see him in a couple weeks.
Oh boy.
Can't wait.
Oh, boy.
All right, but that'll wrap us up here for the first basketball episode of the year. Thank you guys for coming on. I think Cole and Ali, we'll see the two of you a lot when it comes to basketball this
Yes,
season.
sir.
Colton, I'm sure we'll have you back at some point.
Hopefully.
And thanks to everybody who listened. We're taking a week off next week from episodes due to us all not being here for break. But when we come back, we'll be right in the flow of things with basketball season getting started and UK football taking on Tennessee that week. So it'll be a big week.
Absolutely. Be sure to check out kykernel.com for all our basketball special section stuff we got coming out, covering both the men's and women's teams. Shout out Maddie Scherr also. We didn't touch on the women's team as much this episode, but definitely going to be some big things to talk about with that team in the future episodes, especially once we have some actual exhibition games to talk about. There just isn't as much to talk about with Big Blue Madness because, they didn't do a ton. But once we have some exhibitions to talk about there's going to be a lot of breakdown to do on that team. Shout out Maddie Scherr. This is her team. It's going to be this team's going to do what she does. How good she can take them. But be sure to check out kykernel.com for all our basketball special section coming out. We'll also have papers, like physical papers on the racks around campus. I'll put out a thing on Twitter. If anyone off campus wants some of those, I'll be sure to send them your way. But we're very proud of the special section, so be sure to check it out.
Can't wait to come back here and talk about Kentucky's 35-10 loss to Tennessee on the next podcast here. And also shout out Anaya Russell, B. Moore. She's going to also be a threat on the women's team this year. So expect the women's teams to actually win some games this year. Oh, 100%. But expect this women's team to win some games that they want to have last season.
All right. Well, thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you next time.